Hello and welcome to the Lucas-Nuelle webinars. So my name is Daniel Brown. I'm here with my good friend and colleague Christian Klingler.
Hi from my side as well. Good to be here. Good to have you here.
And yeah, great to see you. We've got people from literally all around the world signing in today.
That's
great to write in where you're looking in from in chat. We always love to hear where the people are signing in from.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to have a look at the CarTrain high voltage battery trainer. So we've got a video lined up from you that you made earlier, Christian.
That's right.
Have a look at. This is a system that I personally love working with. Been all around the world with this system, set it up in schools, America, China, Africa, and I really love working with this one. And we're going to have a look at some of the things that you show us in the video later. What are some of the highlights, you might say, or some of what can we do with that, for example?
Well, as you said, when we hear that you have traveled all over the world, basically to train the system, to show it, or also to put it into operation at the different colleges, car manufacturers, or whatever you have been to, there you see that there's a very high acceptance regarding that training system, and as well the other one, which we have seen on Monday, for example. We going a little bit more detail about this later on. But okay, when we are talking about the high voltage battery, we are talking more or less about the central element, about the heart of the hybrid or the electric vehicle. But even when it's the most important part of the car, it's also the most critical part, especially regarding the safety. So we all know hybrid and electric vehicles are well established, they are absolutely safe, exactly the same safety level like a combustion engine car or whatever else you want to think about it. But the problem really comes down inside the workshop. So especially if you have to work on a high voltage battery, it's one thing to shut down the high voltage system and work around the high voltage battery, but it's a completely different thing if you have to step inside the high voltage battery and open it up. Because as we all know, while you can shut down the high voltage all around the car, you are not able to shut it down in the high voltage battery.
Absolutely.
So if you get in touch with the high voltage battery, there will be always high voltage, and you have to be on a maximum level when you think about safety measures and all that, how you can protect yourself. So that's so important. And I think that's the unique thing about this trainer. And correct myself, but I do not know any other trainer which is comparable with this one, especially from the practical side. If you are talking about hands-on training, we are talking here basically, you have a real high voltage battery with lithium ion cells on it. So we have a real high voltage level. We are above 60 volt. So that means we are operating or we are working on a real high voltage battery, but everything is designed that way that it's completely student safe. So that's like the unique thing which we have here, that you have a real high voltage battery, but it's completely student safe. So everything you can do on a real car, on a real high voltage battery, you can do here as well, but you are not in 1 second. There is the risk that you're getting in trouble with a high voltage battery.
Okay, so one of the things that was really a big deciding factor when we made this system was, as you were saying before, it was about, you could, for example, Toyota Prius was probably the most predominant hybrid vehicle. We call them hybrid electric, so they still run on electric motor. So there is still a high voltage battery in there, but in the Prius, for example, before the plug-in Prius, so maybe something we'll probably go into a little bit more technical details today. Absolutely. As well, because we're both on the product development and training side here. So, and I think, and let us know if you want to hear more technical things. Just send in the questions, and we'll go as deep as you're interested. But for example, hybrid vehicles, if you're looking at a normal hybrid vehicle like the old Prius, they're nickel metal hydride batteries.
Yes.
But as soon as you go into anything plug-in, so that includes the pure electric, but you also get hybrid vehicles that are plug-in as well that can drive for, say, 50 kilometers or 30 miles. And once we start going into the lithium, that's when it gets a little bit dangerous. So the old days with Toyota, Prius, you could just order a new battery and they'll send it, ship it, no problem.
That was basically easy, exactly. So at the start, or back in the day, where we were right at the beginning of hybrid electric vehicles, where you basically, if you saw a Prius on the road, it was a little bit of, okay, very special. The car looks very special. So it didn't fit in the picture of the all-day street life, for example, or the traffic picture. But nowadays, like you said, we have a lot more cars on the road which are hybrid or electric vehicle. It's not just Toyota, it's Audi, it's Tesla, and many, many more. And of course, when we are talking about the most important part of the car, unfortunately, it's also the case that's the most expensive part of the car. So like Daniel said, the car manufacturer, of course, find out when there was a problem back in the day with a high voltage battery. They just put it or took it out of the car, send it back to the car manufacturer, and you got a new one. Nowadays, you definitely know that this is too expensive, especially regarding...
It's just too dangerous.
Too dangerous.
A lot of shipping companies just will not ship those batteries.
They don't ship the battery, but also we are talking about material and resources which are going into the high voltage battery. And here, it's an absolutely critical element that the technician, the high voltage technician, learns to open the high voltage battery, to understand what's inside the high voltage battery and how to repair it.
So that's happened here in Germany, for example, with, I think the manufacturers have said the dealerships will be responsible for repairing batteries of the electric vehicles. They won't be, there's no such thing as switching out the whole batteries.
Exactly.
The people are going to have to really understand what the problem is within the battery and repair it on site.
And if you say that, so when we are taking our perspective a little bit away from just the car manufacturers, when we are looking at the certain curriculums all over the world. So for example, in Germany, there is this DGUV, quite strange name, but that's how it is called.
It's basically the occupational health and safety for those years around the world.
But we won't say now the German translation for that, that makes it crazy. There we have, for example, 3 steps. First level is more or less awareness. That's for people that they just understand, I'm here in front of a hybrid or electric vehicle and I have to take care of certain points. The second level then is where you say, okay, you're working on the hybrid or electric vehicle, but around the high voltage battery. So you have to shut down the high voltage battery and do service, diagnostics, or whatever around this part. And then, but we have also level 3, which definitely tells you, on the one hand, to how to work inside the high voltage battery, because even the curriculums have understood that this is critical knowledge and a very important part of the training on hybrid electric vehicles. And if we are talking about working on the high voltage battery, we could also go a little bit further. So what does it mean? Especially this level 3 of the German curriculum says that it's not only about the high voltage battery itself, but it is working under live high voltage. So this could happen on the one hand, or on the one side, if you are working inside the high voltage battery. But just let's assume when we have a really heavy accident with a hybrid and electric vehicle, and this vehicle is transported into the workshop, there we couldn't assume anymore that this intrinsic safety system of the car is still working. So we must be at a level, at the expert level, where we at first can understand if the car is critical or not. So can we put it, for example, in the workshop, or do we have to put it outside somewhere at some special place when it starts catching fire, that nothing happens to the surroundings? And all that knowledge must be understood and must be well trained, because this is where you can get inside the workshop, you can get in touch with it every day, basically.
So a good example of that, you're talking about a critical. Okay, what does that mean? So if you've got a vehicle, let's say it's got a large lithium battery in it somehow, you might want to have a look at the temperatures of those cells, because especially for lithium batteries, we all know, we've seen plenty of fires around there of cars, Teslas, and all sorts catching on fire.
Lots of articles in the newspapers.
Yeah, I mean, all cars catch on fire, we see that. But lithium batteries, they can catch on fire, especially when they're short-circuited. But that's something that we show in this course, for example, that you take a reading of the temperature of the cells. And we do know, using NTC, we know that if you've got either short circuit or an open circuit, so open circuit goes cold. If it's got a high resistance, then it gets hot. If you've got a sensor fault, you'll see that one cell is hot.
Absolutely.
But if you've actually got a hot cell, you might see that there's a whole group of cells. And that car is what we would then call critical. And that you then need to quarantine that vehicle, social distancing for the vehicle as well. Put that out away, and do not park that in the workshop under any circumstances. So that's an example of some of the things that you would learn here.
And it's a very small thing what you have to do there. What you have explained now is one small part of the knowledge of level 3 or of this working under live high voltage, but it can destroy complete workshops if you do not know what you're doing there. If you just put such a car,
or you can get killed because you're not covered by all of the safety.
In the best case, you just have damage to a building. In the worst case, you have also damage to human beings. And this is what you definitely don't want to have. So, but now we have talked about the German training system for that, the German curriculum. But let's go, we have friends from all over the world. So what about, for example, about the US? When we have a look at the US, what kind of curriculum do we have there, and how do they take the hybrid electric vehicle section into concern?
Yeah, absolutely. So just give a general overview around the world of different systems. So, because we get this a lot of the time, a lot of countries look to the German DGUV certification for hybrid, or for high voltage, but it's not really transferable. It's not really a qualification. It's a certificate. Certification, qualification. A lot of time people mix those up, but they're actually different things. ASE, so that's Automotive Service Excellence. They're in basically North America, partly in South America, and they're looking to go international as well. But they have something called ASE L3, and that's a specialist test. And so they've got A tests that go from 1 to 8, and then there's the L1, 2, 3. L3 is for hybrid and electric vehicle specialist.
And just to add something here, this is exactly the other training system which we have presented on Monday and which will be presented on Friday, I guess.
I think it's tomorrow.
Thursday or Friday.
Same time. No, tomorrow night. So same time tomorrow. We'll be doing the hybrid trainer.
So this is what we call our ASE L3 trainer, because this is directly pointing at the ASE L3 test and setting the fundamentals for hybrid electric vehicle understanding and all the, creating this culture of safety, working on high voltage system. And this is one reason as well, because this system, as well as this system where we are talking about today, is like a one-stop solution for these topics of hybrid electric vehicle. And that's the reason why it's also part of the Skills USA. But just that, for that, we will go into more detail about the other system then tomorrow. But
yeah, so ASE, that's in North America, but then we also have IMI. So ASE, that's also, you've got to do the test at a ASE center somewhere within the US. You've got to have pre-qualifications with ASE. I think it's 8 and another one electrical and a few other systems. I forget them off the top of my head, but you can only do that basically in the US. But what we've seen, there's a huge amount of interest in other countries that don't have their own. So a couple of years ago, at least in China, you had to be a mechanic. So you had to have your qualifications to be an automotive technician, but you also had to have your qualification to be a high voltage electrician in order to work on cars. Don't know about you, but that's kind of two separate fields that not many people are going to meet. So, but the system that we recommend, especially if you don't have your own, is the IMI.
Yes.
So the IMI is a close partner of ours, and we will be, we're able to offer, well, rather not we are able, the schools around the world, colleges are able to become IMI centers, and using our equipment can then do that qualification themselves. And that's a true international qualification. And so this system here, you talked about the German system being level 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
IMI has a levels 1 to 4. And so
so what's the difference there then?
They actually offer a few other things as well. So level 4, in this case, the level talking about with Germany is kind of a step system, step 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The level is actually a academic level, as the way it's based in the UK. But this is a true international qualification. So level 1 is what they call awareness. And so that's for people, for example, working in dealerships that are test drivers, the service people, the people out in the front in the office and things like that. But then we've also got level 2. Level 2 is kind of like what you were saying, being able to work on a hybrid electric vehicle, but not do any serious work on it. There's kind of 2 levels to the level 2, and then that jumps into level 3.
Yes.
And that's where you're able to isolate the vehicle, remove the service plug, and then remove non-live components. And then you've got also the level 4, which is then similar to the German level 3, where you're able to then work on the battery and things like that.
And that's like the complete solution with qualification, which can go to any country all over the world.
Absolutely.
What I really basically like very much about the IMI is that they take every part into concern. So on the other hand, Daniel said, the EV2, so the level 2 section is basically separated in 2 different ones. So on the one side, they focus the technician, but on the other side, which we shouldn't forget as well, because they are also responsible for it and they're getting in touch with it on the road, that are all the first responders, firefighters, police officers, and all that. When they are called to an accident scene, they are basically the first people, not the high voltage technician inside the workshop. He's maybe at the end of the chain.
Yeah.
These people, like the firefighters and the police officers, they are the first people who get in touch and who have to interact with the damaged hybrid electric vehicle. And also they need not quite a deep technical training, but they need a training which focusing absolutely all the safety aspects.
Yeah.
And we are really happy that together with the IMI, we can offer all that, really this complete package. So for example, if your country tells, or your trainings institute in your country says, we want to have a complete solution for hybrid electric vehicle training, integrating not only the technician side, but also the first responder side, the IMI and we together can offer you this complete solution in creating or equipping your whole training center with all the necessary components, including the qualification. That means by the end of the training, you can hand over, after some assessment, you can hand over a certificate to your students, and they are officially approved IMI high voltage technicians, or high voltage experts, basically.
Yeah. And for example, I know something that's, so my background is, as you know, as a teacher in Australia, and where I used to work, we offered the night classes, for example.
Okay,
and that's a perfect example. And that's where often schools, institute make the money, so to speak. It's not the everyday training of the apprentices or trainees, but it's when you're able to offer those classes, those night classes, and that's where the schools are able to procure more equipment and things like that. So we often get asked that, okay, what can we do? What sort of training can you do with this? Okay, you can train the normal technicians, but also at night classes, people that, and that's both of these systems. So this one today, the high voltage battery, but also the hybrid system.
Going hand in hand.
You can teach night classes to technicians, to young people that are learning in the middle of their normal training. It's a good place for them to start, but also police, firefighters, ambulance, people that might come into contact, especially with those accident vehicles.
I remember this scene where the new Audi Q8 was basically, that was more or less a prototype who was giving out to some VIP, and he just had such a heavy accident that so at the Q8, the e-tron, similar to the Tesla, the whole high voltage battery is basically the floor of the car. And in this accident, the whole battery was ripped out of the car and lay beside the car, basically. And that was something where the firefighters were absolutely overwhelmed by it, because they had no idea what they should do now. They know it was a high voltage battery with high risk potential, but what should they do?
Yep.
With this IMI qualification, no problem, piece of cake for them. They know what they're going to do. Before we start now with the video, because now our friends can say, hey, you're talking about theoretically solutions with the IMI centers all over the world. But let's throw out some centers which we have right now, or which are established through our cooperation. So let's step into the plane and fly a little bit around the world. So where do we find all IMI centers around the world?
Okay, so our first one was in Ecuador, which happened last year. So this is centers that have set up laboratories based around our equipment and then gone on to become IMI centers.
That's a little bit like a bushfire in this region. Someone started and it's spreading out.
Absolutely.
Interest.
So we're getting a lot of interest in South America because that need is there for qualifications.
Yeah.
So
Ecuador or the South American region is now a little bit warmer. So if you not like so much the hot temperatures, but more the cold temperatures, and you want to visit an IMI center, this is no problem, absolutely possible. Then you have to fly to
Iceland.
Iceland.
So Iceland also just recently, so they've had the equipment for a long time, but they've recently just discovered the IMI qualifications. And so now they've just become an IMI center as well.
And
so
that's great. That's really great. If you see that Iceland is an island, a little bit isolated, but even for them, especially maybe because they are on an island, for them it's very important to have this modern infrastructure, the modern vehicles, the non-emissions vehicles, and they have now the IMI center, approved IMI center on their island, and they can train the high voltage technicians up to the expert level, so that their concept just works. They want to have the cars on the road, but then they need people in the workshops who can service and repair it.
Yep.
And this is where the circle is closing. Do you want to add something? We have talked now a lot of different things.
Yeah, so
I think we jump now into the video.
I think one last one is we made a customized board for a certain customer.
Yeah.
I think
if you like fast cars, then you can visit this center, IMI center. This is directly located in the UK, and it's McLaren. So there we traveled last year, I think it was around November. We traveled over to McLaren, had a bit of discussion with them. And there also one thing which is possible for you, especially when you are belonging to a car manufacturer or something like that, when you have your own logo or something like that, and you want to create this identification with the trainings hardware more with your institute or with your company. So there, like we did it for McLaren, we put their car on the front, we put the McLaren logo. It's a no-brainer for us, and it's a piece of cake for us, but it has a high meaning for the customer, and we are happy to do these customizations for you if you want to have a special car on it or a special logo. So that's no problem at all.
And McLaren became also an IMI center as
exactly.
Well. So really a perfect partnership.
So they have the qualification on the one hand, and they use our our training system now for the training. There are two very, not funny reasons, but logical reasons. On the one hand, their cars are very, very expensive, as we all know, and there are just a few of it. So if they would destroy a car inside the training because they absolutely rip it out and just put it in small pieces, they would get in trouble. So they use for all the training, they use the car train, and the car train is like a red carpet to the real car. And this is now what you will see in the video.
Okay, so we'll have a look at the video. Otherwise, we'll keep talking for the rest of the night, I think, Christian. So better move on. Please put your questions into Q&A if you have any questions, and we'll answer those when we get back after the video.
We're looking forward.
The high voltage battery is the most complex, but also the most dangerous object inside an EV or hybrid electric vehicle. So the question is, how can we do easy to understand and safe training on such a thing without any liability risks? The answer is the CarTrain high voltage battery diagnostic and maintenance. So what do we see here? Basically what you have here is a complete high voltage battery, which you see to the right hand side. We have here 16 lithium ion cells, original ones. Nothing is fake, nothing is simulated. You have a real high voltage battery running inside that system. But of course, it is a training system. It is a trainer. That means everything is designed that way that it's completely student safe. Even if the student is doing something wrong, nothing will happen to the training system and nothing will happen to the student. The 6 lithium cells are just connected in row with each other, and you can completely disassemble it. That means in order to gain the highest qualification level for the different curriculums all over the world, so for example, the trainer as well as the e-learning curriculum, it is aligned to the ASE curriculum in the US, to the German curriculum, the DGUV, and furthermore to the IMI curriculum, which is suitable for the UK or other international countries like Dubai, Asia, and so on. Like I said before, the complete high voltage battery can be disassembled. Why this is so important, we will see later when we do the different diagnostic jobs on the battery. But at first, let's start the car. What we see here is the complete drivetrain of an electric vehicle. What do we do with that? At first, we start and boot the high voltage system. How are we doing that? We push the brake button and we push the ignition switch. Now the system boots up, and as we see here, we are ready to go. Next thing is we start the driving simulation. So what we can do here, we can simulate 5 different driving situations. We will start with driving uphill, driving in flat terrain, doing the coasting, and then we have 2 modes where we can simulate the downhill mode, speaking of regeneration or recuperation. What do we see even more if we want to have a more closer look inside the high voltage battery? We have to use our diagnostic tester. And this is where our e-learning curriculum comes into the game. So that means this is like a one-stop solution for the whole topic for working on high voltage batteries. And integrated is a complete diagnostic testing unit like the car manufacturers are using it. So let's see. We start instruments, tester, and here we go. We have here the complete diagnostic system. But before we go closer to the diagnostics, I put on my safety glasses. Safety first, of course. So let's see what we can do here. We jump now to the high voltage system, system values, cell voltage monitor. And what we see here are the single cell voltages in real time. And when we change something with this driving switch, we see directly a change within this cell monitor. So for example, right now we're driving downhill and we do the regeneration. What we see here is now that electrical energy is flowing into the high voltage battery, and that of course on both sides. When we go back to the coasting mode, what do we see here? It's 0. What does it mean? There is no energy going in or out of the high voltage battery. Completely different when we are driving uphill, what we see for example in that mode. Now we see that in that case, round about 4 amperage are going out of the battery. So there's a load on the high voltage battery and the battery gets discharged. The most important point is now, when we are talking about the hybrid electric vehicles and what we have seen before by analyzing the high voltage battery, in that case we are talking of a vehicle which is in a good state. But what is if there is a vehicle which was previously involved in an accident? There we have got big problems, and a lot of people in this change who are involved in working with these systems or with these damaged cars have to be trained to a certain level. And this starts with the firefighters for the first responders. And even our training system is equipped with certain things which makes the firefighters able to understand what is important about hybrid electric vehicles if they have to deal with it. First, it starts with the rescue cards. The rescue cards are inside our e-learning curriculum. But furthermore, and much more important, are the single components which are part of a high voltage system inside the car, which are specially designed for firefighters, for example. So if we have a look at the system, we see this is, for example, this fuse over here. With this fuse, we can directly deactivate the high voltage system when we pull it out. Similar to that, we have our 12-volt service disconnect. If the firefighters are pulling that out, the high voltage system is disconnected too. But it's not only about the firefighters, it's also about the tow truck drivers. When they put the damaged vehicle on their truck and bring it to the workshop in order to repair it, they need to make sure that they know what's going on with the car in spec. Just imagine you are stuck in a traffic jam and suddenly the high voltage battery catches fire. That's a disaster. Furthermore, when we arrive at the workshop, there everything is about the guy who's responsible for the workshop. This guy in the workshop must have the highest qualification for high voltage because he has to decide what happens to the car. But in order that he can decide what he should do with it, he has to understand if the car has a critical or a non-critical fault. How do we find out that? This is where we use the car train again in order to create this absolutely necessary diagnostic competencies. How are we trained that? No problem, have a look inside the e-learning curriculum. We just shut down the car before. So what we have inside this curriculum is a complete section of diagnostic work. Within the e-learning curriculum, we have more than 23 different job orders. And the very good thing about that, these are faults which are directly integrated in the high voltage battery. That means you have nothing to do on it, just click on the page and the fault will be active inside the high voltage battery. With another click, you can directly delete it and the car is good again. Just think about doing that to a real vehicle. That would mean you have to open the high voltage battery and you have to put in faults inside the high voltage system. That means you have to manipulate the complete high voltage system. All your guarantee, all your assurance stuff will be gone. No one will be responsible for that except yourself. And just imagine such a modified vehicle will catch fire. If you modify such a hybrid or electric vehicle, the complete responsibility is at your hands. Therefore, it's much better to use our trainer so you get rid of all the liability risks. Here, everything is designed and developed this way that a student can work on it. And even if he's doing something wrong, also in the diagnostic part, nothing will happen to the system or to the student. Win-win situation. Let's go back to the job order. Now we will do, for example, job order 1. So we're just jumping inside this folder, click on it, and there the fault is activated. Okay, what kind of fault do we have now? Let's start the car again. We start the car. And we see now there's directly the high voltage fault light is active. So it means something is wrong. And there is another thing which we can see. Also, the fan for cooling the high voltage battery is running. So we can assume that there is a fault which is related to a temperature issue. In order to find out what kind of temperature problem we do have here, we will now start the diagnostic tester again and read out the fault memory. So we go to Instruments, Tester, and we're just inside our tester. Step forward, high voltage system, fault codes, read. And there we see with the original fault code P1A32, battery temperature abnormality. So that means we have an abnormal temperature situation inside the high voltage battery. Now we are at the border where we have to decide if it's a critical or non-critical fault. Why is that so important? If we really have a temperature issue here, that would mean it is critical because then the battery can heat up and it can possibly catch fire. On the other hand, it would be a non-critical fault when the problem lies inside the sensors, for example, for the temperature monitoring of the high voltage battery. In order to find out that, we have another look at our temperature monitor. So we leave the fault code reading, go back to system values, and now we open the temperature monitor. What do we see here? We see now for each single temperature sensor the measured temperature. If we have a look at the monitor, we see on the left bank everything is fine. We round 27 degrees. On the right-hand side, we suddenly see that temperature sensor 2 shows up a temperature of minus 40 degrees. What does it mean for us now? We are all aware of that this is not the normal temperature. So at first, let's locate where the sensor is. We have here T1, T2. That means here we have the temperature sensor, which is obviously faulty. So what does this temperature tell us now? At minus 40 degrees, no fire will start. But we can say it's a non-critical fault at that stage. Why can we say that? Because it means that this NTC temperature sensor has something like a disconnect or interruption inside the wiring or inside the sensor itself. This is why it shows up to minus 40 degrees. Now we know that this is a non-critical fault. That means we can bring the car inside, or we can let it inside the workshop, open the battery and repair it. In order to open the high voltage battery, we have to shut down the high voltage beforehand. And I will show you now how we can do that on that system as well. This system uses a very modern way of shutting down a high voltage system by the help of the tester itself. So we navigate back to special functions, and there we have high voltage isolation procedure. And this is exactly what we want to do now. So we click on that. There are certain warnings. We can run through it. And now it tells us to switch on ignition, not to ready mode. That means we switch off the system and just turn on the ignition. Now we go one step further so that the system will go into the self-testing mode. And this is what we see now here. High voltage system is active. That means the electronic inside the high voltage system measures the actual or real-time voltage of the high voltage system. And right now we are still in the high voltage active state. So next step, switch off the ignition. We will do that. And then it tells us disconnect the green 12 volt service disconnect. Which service disconnect is that? Of course, this one over here. What are we doing? We just grab it, but stop here. Do we need to wear any gloves? Like this? No, we don't need to wear these gloves. We can get rid of that because we are here not in the high voltage system. This is just a 12 volt system. Therefore, no need for gloves. I can do it with my bare hands. So just go here, open it. Now it is pulled out. So the high voltage system got a signal to disconnect itself, and now we have to secure it that no one else can put it back into operation. This is why we use this padlock. We put it through the hole, we lock it, and of course we keep that key inside our pocket. So now the system is disabled. Before we can be sure about that, the system has to do a last measurement and to tell us that the high voltage system is safely shut down. So we go to the next step, switch the ignition on, and now we see the high voltage system is de-energized. This is the point where we know that the high voltage system is shut down and we can work safely around the high voltage battery. Beware, not inside the high voltage battery. We have now done everything in order to get the high voltage battery out and to open it. But the high voltage battery always remains high voltage. This is why we need to wear always the PPE as soon as we go into the high voltage battery and work inside the high voltage battery. Now we have shown how to deal with a non-critical fault. Next step will be to show you a critical fault. This is where we switch to job order 19. So 19 tells us short range. We just open the folder and jump to diagnostic procedure. So that means, again, the fault is now injected directly into the high voltage battery. What kind of fault we have now, we will find out. At first, let's start the system. So we boot up the system again, but what we see here is ready mode. Okay, the car has not found any fault so far. So next step will be we have to go back to the diagnostic tester and read out the fault memory. So we go to, again, to instruments, tester, and then to our fault reading, fault codes. And we read out the faults. But even here, there are no faults. So what does it mean? Obviously, we have a fault which is only or can only be detected while driving. So let's go for a test drive. We start the car and just drive uphill. Right now, nothing happens. So let's use the time in order to jump back to the voltage monitor. Right now, you have seen he has now caught the fault. So the high voltage light came on. The fan came on as well, and it has detected a fault right now. So let's see what the temperature will tell us now. Or we can even go back to the fault monitor and see what the faults are there. So we read out, and there we see now we have the fault. P1A30, cell error, voltage low. What does it mean? We will check now in the voltage monitor. So we go back to system values, cell voltage monitor. If we have a look at the left bank, we see everything is okay. All the voltages of the single cells are around 3.5 volts, so that's pretty good. On the right hand side, there we see, even indicated through the red light, one of the cells is out of range. And there we have, instead of 3.4, we just have 3.06 volt. This is much too low. And what will tell us that? That there is a too high resistance in this cell. In the cell or even around it in the connections between the cell and the rest of the high voltage battery. What would be the next step? Now we have a critical fault here. Could lead to any further problems. So we definitely have to repair it. That means the car has to go back into the workshop. We have to shut it down. And then we have to shut down the vehicle again, put on our PPE, and then disassemble the complete high voltage battery, and we have to swap the cell. The broken cell, in that case, it's cell 6, and this is this one over here. So this cell is in that case broken and needs to be changed. When everything is fine again, the teacher or the student just delete the fault again, jumps back out of from the fault page, and everything is fine again, and the system is put back into normal conditions. What we see here now is that we have a perfect training system for students who want to become a high voltage expert. With this training system, you learn everything which you need to work safely inside the high voltage battery, or even to work around damaged hybrid or electric vehicles. And when you have once fulfilled these requirements and worked through all these job orders, you have the right diagnostic competencies to work on a real car, and you have fulfilled the highest level of training.
Okay, welcome back.
Welcome back.
So hope that's given you some idea of the system and what it can do. One of the things that I just seen there in the video, Christian, was putting suspicious cells under load. So it's really important fact, as we were talking about before, if you repair a battery, so even if you get some sort of fault, even if it tells you, which is not necessarily likely, which group of cells,
yes,
say called a module, for example, which group is faulty. If we've got a high resistance there, you're not going to pick that up if you take the battery out first and then just measure the voltage, because the voltage will be the same.
That's right, yeah.
It's only when you put it under load. And so that's a really important fact when diagnosing these batteries, is to, if you can monitor the cell voltages with a scan tool during the road test before, to really put it under load and see what effect that has on the voltages of the cells as well.
Absolutely. And it's just one of the faults. There are above 23 different job tasks, diagnostic tasks, which you can do on the car train. And as we have seen, it's so easy to integrate it. So you don't have to manipulate anything, or you don't have to just think about you have to put real faults on a real high voltage battery.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a nightmare. We don't have to talk about that.
So that's what we've had. A lot of the manufacturers here in Germany have this system, and they using it for that exact same fact.
Exactly.
So one of the things is the vehicles. So it's kind of like you were saying with McLaren. They can get vehicles, but they're not. All of the trainers that we've spoken to us said there's no way I'm going to put a fault into a brand new vehicle battery, and then that vehicle has to go back to be sold at some point as well. It's too dangerous and too much work.
And absolutely, just when you think about what can happen to your own, if you try to integrate, to modify the high voltage battery to that extent, and even furthermore, when you think about what could happen to the student, when you assume that as a training system, no, it's not a training system. A manipulated high voltage battery is a manipulated high voltage battery.
Exactly.
And it's not a training system because there are no safety systems. There are no fallback strategies. What happens in certain situations when something goes wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where we're seeing a lot of schools. So we've actually got a question here. Have you sold a lot of these systems in the US market? So that's from Jovanka. Thank you very much for the question. So I personally have done training for 5 in the US. Doesn't mean that that's all there is, but I know of 5. I'm not sure if you know of many others, but we've certainly sold quite a few of these around the world.
Like we said, because we have aligned this training system for the US market a few years before, so the interest is really, really grown because, the colleagues in the US just see the big advantage. It's not only that the schools, the colleges, the car manufacturers have seen it, it was also clearly seen by the expert team for the Skills USA, for the automotive council, basically. And there was I think, all the US guys and girls are aware of Skills USA. So there is an automotive contest. And of course, they said, look, there are so many hybrid electric vehicles on the US roads. With Tesla, we have our own worldwide known brand, which producing exclusively electric vehicles. But when we are looking at the automotive apprenticeship, we see that Skills USA, which is just a famous big event, which has a really, really high importance for the US market and for the apprenticeship. But the problem was when we talked to the people, or Daniel talked to them, like how many years ago? 4 or 5?
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
At least they were like, yeah, you're right. We have the cars on the road. We are one of the hot spots in the world for hybrid electric vehicles, but we do not pay attention to it inside Skills USA. Then after they've recognized that, they were like, but what shall we do? We are limited with space anyway. We have already real combustion cars there. So on the one hand, we do not have the space to put another hybrid electric vehicle station, so another 5 cars into the contest area. And on the other hand, it's just much too dangerous because what do we want to do on this hybrid electric vehicle? Do we want to do a diagnosis on that? There are so many traps which could happen when you're working on a real high voltage vehicle under assessment situation. And especially, you have seen that, I have seen that, how nervous the students were when they got to this high voltage system.
Absolutely. That fits into another question that we've got from Jovanka here. And that's, I was told that this is the only ASE L3 system currently available. And is this true? So actually, what you're talking about for the Skills USA event there is the other trainer that will be doing tomorrow night. So that's the hybrid and electric vehicle car train. So that's what would be the introduction to cover the ASE L3 or the German first 2 levels and the IMI first 3 levels. What we're talking about today is the next step.
Extended, yeah.
So, and ASE, there is no level for working inside the high voltage battery. There has been a lot of talk about creating a license in the US. So I've been involved in a couple of different committees that are exploring that. And so far, nothing's come of that. So ASE L3 is the only one. But this trainer that we're talking about today is kind of like the advanced level that's going inside the battery. ASE L3 doesn't go that far. There is one...
Not yet, at least.
There is one line working inside the battery, but it's literally one line out of a whole document.
20 pages, whatever.
Exactly. So, but with the other training system, the other car train, the introduction, the hybrid electric vehicle trainer, I think we're having close to 30 of those in the US now.
And that's the ACE L3 trainer, that's right. But this trainer for the high voltage battery is basically on the same road like the other one. It's just a little bit, before its time. So with this bundle of these two trainers, you are absolutely capable of the whole hybrid electric vehicle qualification. But with these two trainers, you can, you have the fully ASE L3 curriculum completed, but also you are prepared for the future. Because one thing is sure, it definitely will come to any curriculums that you have to do something on the one hand inside the high voltage battery, on the other hand working under live high voltage in case of an accident, for example.
Absolutely. And we're not trying to say either that you don't need real vehicles in the training situation as well. That's it's just saying that this here particularly is it's a new topic. Like we're talking high voltage, we're talking things that are new to automotive guys, inverters, three-phase motors, things like that. So and once you've got a vehicle in the training workshop, doesn't mean that you can see inside and how it works, especially with faults and being able the measurement points. So
absolutely.
If this interests you, be sure to check in tomorrow for the same system. For the other car train system to have a look as well. We've already done that one as well.
That's right. Yeah, this one will be repeated.
Did that yesterday morning. Sorry, it's been some long days here.
Yeah. So definitely for tomorrow we will have the EV car train, so the Skills US trainer or the ACE L3 trainer. Two names for the same system. But like you said, when you're talking about real cars, of course, this is here again like we do the preparation, we do everything beforehand before you go to the real car, because in that case, it's not like that a student or apprentice can go like to a normal combustion engine car and just play around a little bit. In that case, before you go to a real vehicle, there must be a training before. You must have reached a certain level of knowledge, especially from the perspective of all the safety regulations and the safety procedure before you go to the real vehicle. And the car train, especially the e-learning course, which is coming with it together, is preparing that step from the training system to the real car, based on its practical task sheets.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of taking you on from that and then putting it into that next level where you can then say, okay, let's have a look at the vehicle. And so that's something that's also covered in the e-learning curriculum there, being able to just print out some task sheets and go on to the real vehicle.
To any vehicle, what you just have. It's not about that the task sheets are saying you have to use a certain hybrid or electric vehicle. It's designed that way that it's absolutely, the common way. You just print it out, give it to your student, go with him over to the real car, and you can use any car with a hybrid, with the high voltage system. Doesn't matter if it's a hybrid, electric vehicle, and it's absolutely doesn't matter from which brand it comes.
Yep. Okay, we've got a question from Maximilian here. How much does the car train system cost? Okay, so I'd just like to say we're on the technical side. We don't cover the sales at all, but and we definitely don't want to say any prices because we've got problems with exchange rates and shipping and all that around the world. Exactly. So we're just going to keep that.
Our colleague in the background will send you via text answer the email of your sales manager, your sales area manager, and you can directly contact him for an offer.
And one of our sales guys, actually our sales director for the US, has just put in his details there as well. So if you're in the US and would like to get in contact with someone about that, his name was Gerald, and he's in the now published Q&A section there. So you can contact him at any time, look at our websites, things like that. I think our emails are even on the registration, Christian, myself. So if you have any questions, just let us know, and we'll be more than happy to do that. We're not getting any other questions yet, but if you've got any questions, and by all means, if you've got technical questions, even if it's just something that you're interested in hybrid electric vehicles, how do the motors work or anything, we'd be more than happy to have a chat with you about it.
What I also like, and where we should basically talk about, is the diagnostic unit, which is integrated into the car train. So of course we have the problem, if you want to use a real diagnostic tester from Snap-on, for example, this car or the trainer would need to be part of the diagnostic software. This is of course a little bit tricky and difficult. So what we have done here, we have really taken care of everything and created a completely car manufacturer-like diagnostic tester and integrated that into the virtual instruments of the e-learning course. So that means basically what we have seen in the video as well, you have your own diagnostic tester directly built into the system.
I really love that about this system. That credit goes to our other colleague, Bernd Bongartz, who developed this system. That's a really, really cool development.
And when you work with it, it feels like a real diagnostic tester. You can read out the fault codes, you get real world fault codes. So you definitely can run through the diagnostic like you would do it in the workshop on a real car. You have certain monitors where you can see the cell voltage, the temperature, single status of the interlock, and much more. You have to take a look at it. And of course, you can do the tester-based shutdown, what we've seen in the video as well. And what's very interesting with that, so when we're speaking about the faults, and that's where we come from, or this is a fault where you would come from a level 2 technician situation into a level 3 technician situation. And that's, for example, if the tester will tell you, so basically this tester-based shutdown is a very easy way of shutting down the vehicle. The idea of the car manufacturers is to get more, or to get the distance more away from the high voltage system. You do not need gloves because you do not get in touch with the high voltage system. You control everything from the outside. But what happens, for example, and that's a serious thing, when the tester suddenly says, shutdown failed. Then you are again on the highest level where you need to assume that the car is not, so the intrinsic safety system of the car is not working anymore, and you have to assume that you have to work under live high voltage. And that's a fault which you can create with the car train absolutely easily.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the faults that you see in the system are just really, really cool. I have to say, it's once you go through coming
from the real world. So we have talked to the car manufacturers there, and they gave us a feedback, and the faults which are appearing inside the high voltage system of the car train, also of the other car train system of the ACE EL3 trainer, both have a fault simulation, and both faults are the feedback from the car manufacturers what basically happened on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you're talking about there is one of the when the contactors are known to weld shut. So the contactors are the system main relays, which basically separate the high voltage battery from the rest of the system. And so the traditional way of shutting it down is that you need to then remove the plug and then measure it physically somewhere on the vehicle to measure if there is high voltage there. And what we're able to do on this system is simulate that the contactors are still closed, welded shut, and we're actually then testing. So they do that here in Germany, seeing that the students, did they measure it or just do it quickly? Because there is still high voltage at the measurement point. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions here. Do you have any car manufacturers using this system?
Okay, we're talking there about worldwide, and absolutely. So we have Audi using it, Porsche, Mercedes, BMW. So all the global players are basically using it. Toyota's also in discussion with them. I'm not quite sure about Hyundai. They were definitely interested in that as well. So, but I don't know what's the actual status there. Basically, McLaren is thinking about it as well. Okay, of course, due to the COVID-19 crisis, everything got a little bit slower.
It was planned. They have the other trainer.
Exactly.
And so the plan was to put this one into action as well. But definitely all the German manufacturers have it in all their training
yeah.
centers here, and then we're in discussions about internationally as well.
There are also some manufacturers which are a little bit outside the the normal automotive area, which goes a little bit into more the heavy duty direction or to the suppliers, for example.
So that's true. In the meantime, since this video has been that we just showed, there's now the system also as a heavy vehicle.
Exactly.
Is now available
so
as well.
Both systems are available as a heavy-duty vehicle version, basically, and that's why also other manufacturers are interested in that. Bosch has the system, for example, using, I think, Continental as well. So yeah, there is a big benefit, especially for the car manufacturers, and they always clearly mark that they use that before they go to their real cars. And therefore, we can absolutely say, yes, this car train and the other car train is used by a lot of different car manufacturers.
Absolutely. Question from Steve Vale here.
Yeah.
If you have only one of the trainers and 25 students, have either of you guys seen strategy so each student can get their hands on the trainer, or is it mainly used by the instructor for demonstration?
Okay, we have here various possibilities. Of course, you can do the classical lesson where you just take the instructor at the front. We have, for example, with the other car train, we have the possibility, there is a small touch screen in it, and you can present that on a big display, on a big projector to make it available for the whole class. But we have a very unique thing, or this is what we want to give to our customers. One of the most important part beside the hardware is the e-learning course, the curriculum. We spend a lot of time into it. There goes a lot of informations, videos, animations, questions, experiments. All that is inside the curriculum, in the e-learning curriculum. And this curriculum is really set up this way that you do not need any other information. You do not need Google, basically. You do not need any other book or whatever. This is like the one-stop solution for it. But we don't put any licensing model behind it. The only thing is the course should not leave your institute or your training center. That means, let's keep, Steve, let's keep your example. You say you have 25 boys and girls around and they want to learn with the system. So what you can do here, you can install the course on all computers inside the lab, for example, or inside your training room. And each computer or our e-learning system is built up that way that every student or every apprentice can have his own account. So it logs in with his account information, for example, can work through the course up to a point where he or she comes to a certain experiment. So the experiment, of course, needs the hardware. Then when he answered all the questions and he is ready to go, he on his own, she on his own, or in a group out of two, they go to the car train, log in at the computer at the car train, can do the experiment, answer the questions. When they have fulfilled the experiment, they can go back to their computer and go on with the theory. So that's a good possibility and good way or strategy how you can keeping a lot of people busy at the same time while you just have one or two car trains.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see that all around. It's really flexible and up to you how you do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so no more questions come through.
Okay, is there anything to add? What's also great about this system is as well, of course, a hybrid or electric vehicle is not using super petrol or anything like that. It needs electrical energy and it needs to get fed by electrical energy. So it has all the important charging infrastructure integrated. So we have the Type 2 and the CCS charging system, which is more related for Europe, less related for the US. But in order to keep our friends busy in the US as well, that they can do the charging as well, there's also a Type 1 charger integrated. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can always train, show, and charge the batteries of the system because you have, for any country, the right plug.
Absolutely, that's a good point. So being able to do that. Now we have someone with their hand up, Milayov. Sorry, wrong language. We're unable to open up the the microphones to people outside, because we're trying to do a webcast here, there's a little bit of a delay on when we talk as to when the signal goes out, to try and get the quality of the videos a little bit higher. But if you can just type the question in, we'd be more than happy to answer
Take
that.
your time. Also, after the webinar, you can write your questions and we will answer them, of course.
Absolutely. I think probably taking enough of your time, but
just maybe one thing when we are talking about the measurement.
I told you we could keep talking all night about this.
We do it. Not for long anymore. Just this one point when we are talking about measuring instruments. So on the one hand, we all know we have to use certain measurement instruments from the CAT rating, for example, which have to fulfill a certain rating that you're allowed to use them on the high voltage system. Of course, that is the same thing which goes with the car train, with both car trains, and this is also part of the learning content of the curriculum. But in case, basically, you can use any insulation tester, any multimeter, whatever you have in your hands, you can use with a training system together. Because there's nothing simulated, at every measuring point, you have real signals. It doesn't matter if it's a low voltage signal, if it's a high voltage signal, or if it's even a CAN bus signal. So you have even the CAN bus communication between the battery management system on the car train, and it's made this way that you can measure it. Same with the interlock. You have measuring points for the interlock. And what I like absolutely, that you can measure the high voltage relays. That's a very unique thing.
That's a really cool thing as well.
There you can see, you can measure the high voltage plus relay, the high voltage minus relay, and the pre-charge relay. You don't have to modify anything. You just put the measurement leads onto the measurement sockets, and then you can see how the signal relays are switching and how the high voltage system is built up, or even is not building up the high voltage in case of an error. And that you can do with an external, but even better, we have an integrated measuring tool, which brings you a 4-channel oscilloscope.
Yes.
So with the system, you do not need any more space or anything else. Everything's integrated into the car train.
I was actually at a Rio Honda College in Los Angeles. I don't think it was last year. I think it was the year before even. And that's a Tesla training school. And I met with the head teacher there and a guy from Tesla. And I showed him that there with the system main relays. And the guy from Tesla was like, oh my God, I've been trying for years to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
But you can't measure it when everything inside the batteries is completely covered. So you just can't access these things. And here we just do it with a simple 4mm plug. That's awesome.
That's a good example for the general philosophy. We try to give you experiments and possibilities with the hardware, which you cannot do on a real car because it's just too dangerous, or it's just not possible because you have to remove everything from the car. And what you can't do on the hardware because it's just not possible, there we things we show, for example, in the e-learning curriculum. For example, what happens if the interlock is not operating and you pull a high voltage cable under load from its socket? What could happen there? You will see it inside the course. You won't do it in real, you won't do it with your students, but it's great to see on the screen where nothing can happen.
Yeah. Okay, another question here. How much lead time do we need for delivery? Do you want to add something there, or shall I?
Well, that's also a good question for Gerald, basically. He could answer that, but we are...
Well, as a standard, we have a 12-week waiting period, but from the amount of questions about that, I would say if you're desperate, let us know. There's ways we can do around that. So if there's an immediate need for training, for example, there is ways that maybe we can do something about that. So just get in touch. We'll send out an email towards the end of when we've done these webinars in the next day or two. We have a contact there and we can get in touch with us about that. So like I said, normally 12-week waiting because everything gets built here in-house. So it's actually really interesting. Everything right outside the window just there, or the wall right here is where everything gets built here in the company. And we don't have big warehouses full of equipment. We build it to each individual customer.
Exactly.
So,
but please just refer to Gerald. He can give you the most detailed information on that because he's responsible for you and for the delivery.
Absolutely.
Great. So I don't see any more questions here. So on the one hand, we have answered everything, or everyone fall to sleep. Anyway, I hope you had a great time, and we really enjoyed it here, always with you together. It's great to be connected with the whole world, even in these times where we cannot travel. Daniel is normally absolutely used to travel to your country. He was very often in the US and also in Europe at many, many countries, and take care of the customers directly, face to face.
So I'm glad we're able to keep in contact with everyone. It's really important, and seeing a lot of new faces here and new names, so it's really good.
Therefore, we say thank you for your interest from our side. And do you want to add anything? Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Like I said, we could keep talking all night, but I think if anyone has any questions, get in contact with us. And
absolutely,
more than happy.
Absolutely. It was great. Enjoy the day wherever you are, and have a good time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.